Lewis Hamilton has raced in Formula One for years. He has driven championship-winning cars. He has seen almost every technical trick this sport can produce. But what Ferrari just revealed for the Chinese Grand Prix reportedly left even him surprised. Because this is not a normal upgrade. It is a radical aerodynamic weapon. A rear wing so extreme that when the car enters a straight, the entire main plane rotates almost completely, flipping its aerodynamic profile and nearly eliminating drag. Engineers estimate the system could unlock between 8 and 10 kilometers per hour of extra top speed. In Formula One, that is enormous. That is the difference between defending or being impossible to catch. And after the Australian Grand Prix revealed that Ferrari still needed more straight-line efficiency, the team made a bold decision. They accelerated development. They moved the upgrade forward, and they brought the infamous Macarena rear wing to the Chinese Grand Prix. But here is the part that shocked the paddock. Because once rival engineers saw how aggressively this wing actually moves, the conversation inside Formula One changed instantly. Some teams started studying the design. Others started asking questions to the FIA. And many realized something very uncomfortable. If Ferrari's system works exactly the way simulations suggest, Hamilton and Leclerc might suddenly have the most dangerous straight-line weapon on the entire grid. But the real reason this upgrade could change everything is connected to something that happened during the Australian Grand Prix, a detail almost nobody noticed. But the detail that caught Ferrari's attention in Australia was not obvious on television. It was hidden inside the data. Because when engineers began analyzing the telemetry from the race in Melbourne, a pattern started to appear. The SF-26 was extremely strong in several areas. The car launched well from the grid. It had excellent traction coming out of slow corners. Through medium speed sections, it looked stable, balanced, almost effortless to drive. Charles Leclerc attacked confidently. Lewis Hamilton looked comfortable, even though he was still adapting to his new team. For most fans watching the broadcast, Ferrari already looked competitive enough to fight for victories. But inside the garage, engineers were focused on something very specific: straight-line efficiency. Every time the cars accelerated down the longest sections of the circuit, the numbers told a slightly different story. Ferrari was fast, very fast, but another car was consistently reaching slightly higher terminal speeds. Mercedes, not a huge gap, nothing dramatic, but enough to appear again and again in the telemetry. And in Formula One, even a small advantage repeated lap after lap becomes extremely important. A few extra kilometers per hour at the end of every straight changes overtaking opportunities. It changes defensive strategy. It changes how teams deploy electrical energy across a race distance. Ferrari engineers immediately understood the implication. Their car had strong traction, strong corner performance, strong race pace, but on circuits with long straights, they still needed more efficiency, more speed, less drag. And that realization triggered a decision inside Maranello that surprised several people in the paddock. Because Ferrari already had a radical solution waiting. A concept they had quietly tested earlier in the year during the Bahrain tests. At the time, most teams believed it was simply an experimental prototype. Interesting, yes, but probably too extreme to introduce early in the season. But after studying the Australian data, Ferrari changed the plan. They accelerated the development schedule. They prepared multiple versions of the system. And they made a bold decision. They would bring the Macarena rear wing to the Chinese Grand Prix. And the moment that information began circulating through the paddock, rival engineers started paying very close attention. Because if the early data from testing was accurate, Ferrari's new rear wing was not just another upgrade. It was something that could completely change how the entire grid fights on the straights. But the real shock came when rival engineers finally understood what Ferrari had actually built. At first, many teams thought the nickname was just paddock humor. The Macarena. It sounded exaggerated. Something journalists might say for attention. But the moment technical images from testing began circulating between teams, the mood changed immediately. Because Ferrari had not simply modified the rear wing. They had redesigned how the entire system behaves when the car reaches full speed. In a traditional Formula One system, the rear wing only opens slightly when drag reduction activates. A small gap appears between the elements. Air flows through the slot. Drag decreases a little. Top speed increases slightly. It is effective but controlled. Ferrari asked a very different question. What if the wing did not just open? What if it rotated? And that is exactly what they built. Instead of a small movement, The main aerodynamic plane of the wing rotates dramatically when the car enters straight line mode. Not 10 degrees, not 20. The movement is enormous. The wing can rotate between roughly 180 degrees and nearly 270 degrees. That means the aerodynamic profile almost flips upside down. In corners, the wing behaves like a normal high downforce component. The rear of the car stays planted, stable, predictable. But the moment the driver exits the corner and accelerates onto the straight, everything changes. The system activates. The wing rotates. Airflow reorganizes across the rear of the car. And the most important effect appears immediately. Drag almost disappears. Engineers inside the paddock quickly began describing the two configurations in simple terms: corner mode and flight mode. Because when the wing rotates into straight configuration, it almost generates lift instead of downforce, allowing the car to cut through the air far more efficiently. And that is exactly what Ferrari was chasing. Speed. Pure speed. Some technical estimates suggest the concept could deliver between 8 and 10 kilometers per hour more top speed compared with more conservative active wing systems. In Formula One, that difference is massive. It can decide overtakes before drivers even reach the braking zone. It can allow a driver to attack while using less electrical energy. And it can make defending extremely difficult for the car ahead. But Ferrari did not stop there. According to reports circulating in the paddock, the team prepared 3 different specifications of this rear wing for the Chinese Grand Prix. One version designed for higher downforce and stability. Another optimized specifically for the aerodynamic balance of the Shanghai circuit. And a third configuration capable of using the full rotation range of the system. That means Ferrari can adapt the wing depending on track conditions, grip levels, wind direction, and energy management strategy. And when rival teams realized Ferrari had this level of flexibility, the concern inside the paddock grew very quickly. Because if the system works exactly as Ferrari expects, the SF26 could suddenly become one of the most dangerous cars on circuits with long straights. Circuits like Shanghai. And that is exactly where the next part of the story becomes even more interesting. And this is exactly why the Chinese Grand Prix suddenly became the center of attention across the entire paddock. Because Shanghai is not just another circuit, is one of the most revealing tracks on the calendar when it comes to aerodynamic efficiency. The lap begins with long sweeping corners that demand stability and downforce. Drivers must carry speed through a never-ending opening turn that seems to tighten forever. Then the track opens up, acceleration builds, and eventually the cars arrive at one of the longest straights in Formula One. More than a kilometer of full throttle. Drivers remain flat out for several seconds. And during those seconds, one thing matters more than anything else. Drag. The less drag the car has, the faster it accelerates. The faster it reaches the end of the straight, the easier it becomes to overtake. This is exactly why Ferrari decided to accelerate the development of the Macarena rear wing after Australia. Because the team realized something very simple. If their simulations were correct, Shanghai was the perfect place to unleash this system. When the driver exits the final corner and activates straight-line mode, the wing rotates. The airflow changes. The car enters what engineers inside the paddock call flight mode. And suddenly the SF26 could be traveling several kilometers per hour faster than the cars ahead. That difference might sound small, but in Formula One it is enormous. It means closing the gap before the braking zone. It means attacking later. It means forcing the driver ahead to defend aggressively. And if the car behind has better traction coming out of the final corner, the overtake becomes extremely difficult to stop. This is exactly why Ferrari believes the Macarena wing could transform how the SF26 behaves at circuits with long straights. But the opportunity also comes with serious risks. Because a system that rotates through such a large angle operates inside a very narrow performance window. The transition between corner mode and straight mode must be perfectly stable. If the balance of the car shifts too quickly, the rear of the car could feel unpredictable just as the driver accelerates. Crosswinds could amplify that instability. And Shanghai is famous for unpredictable wind conditions. There's also the question of mechanical reliability. A rear wing that rotates between 180 and 270 degrees experiences enormous mechanical stress. Actuators, linkages, electronic control systems. All of them must function perfectly throughout an entire race distance. If the system fails, the consequences are immediate. The wing could become stuck in flight mode, leaving the car with almost no downforce in corners. Or it could remain locked in corner mode, creating huge drag on the straights. Either situation could destroy a race instantly. That is why Ferrari spent weeks refining the system before approving it for competition. Because if everything works exactly as expected, the reward could be enormous. Especially for Lewis Hamilton. For a driver who has spent years fighting for every tenth of a second, the idea of suddenly gaining several kilometers per hour on the longest straight of the circuit is impossible to ignore. It changes how you approach overtakes. It changes how you defend. It changes how you plan the entire race. And that is why the Chinese Grand Prix became more than just the second race of the season. It became the first real test of Ferrari's most radical aerodynamic idea. Because once the lights went out in Shanghai, the entire paddock would finally see the truth. Either the Macarena rear wing would prove to be just another clever innovation, or Lewis Hamilton and Ferrari would suddenly possess one of the most dangerous weapons on the entire grid.